Hey kids, you ever had a crazy day? Well, sometimes in chess we have a crazy rook. Now, what do I mean by this? It's when you constantly try to give your opponent your final piece. I don't know why, but it's often a rook. Well, I do know why. Rooks tend to survive into the endgame for a little bit longer. And the idea is to force your opponent into a stalemate. Now, we're going to take a look at an introductory example first, but the true crazy rook is going to come later. So this first example is going to be like a mildly crazy rook, like a silly rook. We're going to go from silly to crazy. I think you guys can handle the step up. Now, in this position, the black pawns are coming down the chessboard, down the chessboard, down the chessboard. And when you've got two passed pawns, you're almost always winning. However, black still needs to take a little bit of care. I would postulate, if you want to look up that word and make a great score on your year-end exams, that most chess kids in this position would take a look at the chessboard and say, hey, this pawn's stuck. This pawn's mobile. I've got my rook behind the passed pawn. It's time to throw that pawn down the board. Black is winning, charge. Actually, no, sorry, the win just got thrown in the trash can. That move is only good enough for a draw because of the crazy, or should we say silly rook. In this position, white can actually sacrifice the rook for the pawn. Unbelievable. And now if you take, well, I'm sure you've already seen by now the secret. White has managed to magically stalemate himself. Yeah, pretty unbelievable. Right in the middle of the chessboard, stalemate is possible. Now you might say, Fun Master Mike, it's okay. We just don't take the rook. But you probably need to go and look at Fun Master Mike's video on ChessKid about common rook endgames. This position's actually a draw if you don't take the rook because the white king can stay in front of the pawn. You better learn your Philidor and your Lucena positions. Don't have time to show you today. Hop on over to ChessKid. Fun Master Mike has you covered. So in this position, black could still win. He just has to show a little bit more patience and not play pawn h3. In fact, a move like king over would win because now the kings aren't lined up. Now there's not going to be any kind of crazy or silly rook. Now, let's transition and take a look at the true crazy rook that I actually got to use once in a chess game when I was a kid. And here we go. An actual game from Fun Master Mike's time as a chess kid. Some would argue I'm still a kid, but that's a different story. I was literally in single digits as far as my age. Here I was white. Am I completely lost? You better believe it, but I never resigned as a kid because you never know when one of the drawing or even miracle winning mechanisms could be played. So my opponent's got a million extra points. There's no need to count them. I've got one rook left, but it occurred to me, hey, if I don't have my rook on the board, it's stalemate. So I've got to figure out a way to get rid of the rook. Now, it would not be correct to give a check because if I give check, the king would move off the back rank and who knows what would happen. So if we go back and put the rook here, what can I do with the crazy rook? The rook sacrifices for the knight. And if he takes the rook, obviously it is stalemate. What he did in the game was his king ran away. Now, there's a right and a wrong way to use the crazy rook. I know he's crazy, but he actually has a little bit of intelligence too. What we should do is keep that king on the back row and just keep checking on the 7th rank. And it doesn't matter where the king goes. He cannot get himself off of the last rank. And remember the rule, you get in the same position 3 times, it's a draw. It doesn't have to be 3 times in a row. My opponent could have actually made me move my rook back and forth a bunch to get to one of those positions 3 times. But what's important is this. I never want to check here because then the king will walk down the board and now it's actually not so clear. My rook can continue to be crazy, but eventually we might get into some sort of position where my rook can't be so crazy. For example, after check, maybe, just maybe his king would go here. And if we give check here, then after takes, it's not stalemate because the king can move here. Now you might say, well, Fun Master Mike, we can still play this check. I don't know if it's eventually going to work. I think the king has a way to walk out. I'm not even going to show you what it is. But if we just keep the king on the 8th rank, we don't have to do any sort of analysis. It's completely an easy draw. So can the rook be crazy? Yeah. Now it could be a crazy bishop, queen, or knight, but those pieces don't really move in such a way that would make this work quite as well. Maybe crazy queen. Crazy queen might be possible, but crazy rook is the most common of the crazy pieces. So don't give up at the end of the game. If you get rid of all your material except for a rook, you might be able to use this idea. If you liked all the fun you saw today, hit that subscribe button and Fun Master Mike will be back with more crazy examples of chess genius. us later on YouTube.